elections to order. We'll start with public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. I have the list of folks who signed up, so we'll just take them in the order that people signed up. We'll start with Beth Roth. And when you're called, please come up to the microphone, all right?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you need my name and address? And
I have you as Beth Roth, and if you want to give your municipality, that'd be great.
Bedminster. So I first want to say that I want to compliment the Board of Elections for the work that they do, especially around protecting the chain of custody with the drop boxes. I had the privilege of serving as a drop box watcher, and I was very impressed with the care that they take to make sure that that's a secure system. Beyond that, I'm very uneducated. And so I am requesting, do you have in writing anything about the post-election processes? Any kind of documentation that says step by step, this is the post-election process? And actually, do you have anything in writing that covers the entire process from the beginning when the mail-in ballots go out to today? Just so I can educate myself. And I'm also interested in knowing what the process is for mail-in ballots. Who prints them? Who sends them out? What happens to them when they come back to the post office? What happens to the undeliverable mail-in ballots? What concerning the chain of custody with those kinds of questions, just so that we can understand the entire process. And I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And no one is being rude in not answering questions. It is generally set up as an opportunity for the board to receive comment and obviously for the staff to receive comment. So we certainly appreciate it. And if anyone wants to address any of the matters either on staff or on the board that were raised, I know that there is a lot of information on the State Department of State website about the entire process. The ordering of ballots is done at the local level with approved vendors. Anything else from the staff?
I just did want to say that I'm happy to sit down and talk about this with anyone who will help me understand.
Thank you. William Everett. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Middletown Township. Just a couple of statements here, just for your consideration as you go through your process in the next year, and some questions. What happens to the undeliverable ballots that come back to the post office, and what is the process for picking them up? Is there a break in the chain of custody with these ballots? That's one question. What is the process for deciding where the precincts are located? It was reported that there were 3 polling precincts in the Central Bucks High School. One on election day, the Central Bucks School District was closed and all the teachers were sent to the high school for professional development. There was not enough parking spaces to accommodate voters, and many voters left and didn't vote. We're interested in finding out how the county makes those decisions on polling locations. Was due diligence done for the Central Bucks School District? Curious about signature verification and how that's done and handled on the mail ballots. Yeah, I think you mentioned that is there a state place where we can find out that information? Okay, because they often don't match or come close, and how that should be handled. And thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much.
I might be able to address the CB South issue since I vote there. So it was, I think, a miscommunication from the school district. They sent their teachers there for continuing ed that day. It was an in-service day for the teachers, so they had to be there, and they sent them to South, which is the biggest auditorium. Unfortunately, that's also the only school, I think the only one that is used for a poll. and it's 3 polls, so it was pretty crowded there that day. But that usually does not happen. Usually there's plenty of parking there, so.
Great, thank you. Audrey Strine? Good morning.
Hello, everyone. My name is Audrey Strine. I'm from Warwick Township. And just for the record, I've been a committee woman for the past 15 years, so I've seen a big evolution of influx of population, and of course, 2020, the big mail-in ballot fiasco. My one concern, I have 2 concerns. I keep diligent lists of all my voters, and these lists, I've been painstakingly going through my lists. I love color coding in Excel. The yellow highlights throughout my whole list are people that have moved, that are still on the voter rolls. I just started this process in the spring, so I will be checking to see if these people did indeed vote in this election. And to be all fair, you know, sometimes you move 3 months and then, you know, you're still going to your poll because you haven't had a chance to re-register. But I think it's important to validate if someone's consistently voting in this election in Warwick and they've moved 3 years ago. I think that's a major problem that we need to address. Secondly, you know, if, unlike Florida, where you have to apply for the ballot in the primary and the general, in this county, you apply and you get a ballot automatically on the second, within the one election cycle, primary and the general. If that person ends up moving in between the primary and the general, a ballot is going to be coming to their house. So we don't know if someone's filling that out or not. That's a problem. Secondly, I know I said the 90s called and they want their landline numbers back. These lists are abysmal in accurate information. I've been here for, you know, in this area for 35 years, and my phone number, none of my family's phone number is listed on these lists. I get robocalls from the county and such, and text messages. There's a definite disconnect of what's available to the public on walk lists and whether the Democrat headquarters or GOP or here, we walk in here and we get blank or old landlines. Could we please somehow merge those and get accurate information? And I think this goes to the thing of the people's confidence in elections, you know, when they're not getting accurate information or they don't have that chain of command information given to them, it lessens their view of that we have, you know, the integrity, especially taking away the control of the local precinct where those mail-in ballots are not coming and it's into the big dragon and who knows what goes on behind the man behind the curtain. So if we could make some of these reasonable requests, I think that would go a long way in helping, you know, restore some integrity. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. And, staff could confirm the only automatic mailing is of the application. You can sign up to receive the application regularly, but not the ballots, correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Gail Thibodeau?
Good morning, I'm Gail Thibodeau from Middletown Township, and I also am a committee woman, and I have been for 8 years. I have a couple questions. There was an inconsistency at my polling place. I stay around for the counts at the end of the night as well.
If you could just speak a little slower and a little louder, that would be great.
Okay.
It is being streamed, so I just want to make sure people can hear you.
Okay. I am a committee woman from Middletown Township, and I have been doing this for about 8 years. So I stick around at the end of the night to count, to observe the count. And this time, there were write-ins, and it's upper 8 is the precinct. And typically in the past, you would see a number of whatever the write-ins were and a name. Well, on the receipt that came out of both machines at my poll, there were no names. So whoever voted for write-ins, of course they were insignificant numbers, but it was different than it was in the past. And I spoke with the other committee man in our precinct. We have 3 precincts at our polling place. So that makes you wonder what was being missed there. So I had sent an email to the Board of Elections this past week, hoping for a response on that'll be looked into. And then also regarding absentee ballots, I've heard many explanations over the years from non-official people. So I'm asking the official people, how are absentee ballots counted and are they always counted? Especially I'm thinking about military ballots that are from overseas. And also, is there any way we can get printed copies of our in-person vote? I mean, some people take copies with their cell phones. I've seen that happen. But I'm just curious about that, if that's a possibility. Okay,
I'm
thanks for
sorry, could you, I missed the last question about the actual, who actually came out to vote?
No.
a copy of our ballot
Oh, of the
after it was filled in.
After it was registered, that you knew you
Yeah,
voted and it
and after
counted
it was
you. Yeah, we
put in
don't
the
have that.
scanner.
These machines don't do that.
All right. Would be
It's a
nice.
good question.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that concludes the folks who have signed up for public comment. At this point, we'll address the minutes from our prior meetings. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the September 13th meeting.
Motion to approve?
Motion second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And with regard to the September 15th, 2023 meeting,
Motion to approve?
I second it.
any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. I want to have a discussion of the status of the ballots that were segregated during the November 7th general election. And I'll turn it over to staff to address each of those categories.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll start with, as on the agenda, the declaration deficiencies. So the first category is no signature. The election code and case law are clear that a signature is required on the outer envelope. We had 54 ballots that were unsigned. Our recommendation is to reject those ballots.
We'll deal with them individually.
And why don't we do the motions and then count?
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion that we reject the 54 ballots with no signature.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
The next category is undated and incorrectly dated ballots. As the board is aware, there have been significant legal challenges related to dating ballots. Most recent PA Supreme Court order, Ball versus Chapman, required that undated and incorrectly dated ballots be set aside and that boards of election refrain from counting these ballots. The Department of State has also issued guidance advising counties to set aside these ballots and not include them in their count. In our administration of the election, the staff set aside ballots as incorrectly dated if no reasonable interpretation of the voter's date could conform to the appropriate date range of this election, which is for normal ballots, September 23rd, 2023 to election day, November 7th, 2023. And for military and overseas, they had to be dated between October 6th of 2023 and November 7th of 2023. And just to address one comment that we had about military and overseas ballots, those, today is the last day that they can be received, so they haven't been canvassed yet after today's meeting. Actually, tomorrow we'll start canvassing. I think there's only a handful of military and overseas this year. Back to the categories here. So for undated ballots, we had 169 ballots that were undated, and our recommendation is to reject those ballots. For incorrectly dated ballots, those are ballots that fell outside the date range that was mentioned. We had 138 of those ballots, and our recommendation is to reject those ballots as well.
Just one clarification for the record. I'm not sure if my mic's picking up. The two date ranges are flipped, meaning the September 23rd to November 7th date range is actually for military overseas, and the October 6th to November 7th. I think I misstated the flip again.
That's all right.
Yeah, October 6th to November 7th is the normal ballots, and September 23rd to November 7th is the military and overseas.
All right. So first, I'll make a motion that we reject the 169 ballots that are undated.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
And then I'll make a motion that we reject the 138 ballots that are incorrectly dated.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
The next category we have has to do with secrecy envelope deficiencies. So the first is what we call no secrecy envelopes. So this would be ballots that are received without a secrecy envelope. They're just stuffed inside the outer envelope. The election code and case law are clear that ballots not enclosed in the secrecy envelope must be rejected. We had 177 of these ballots, and our recommendation is to reject those ballots.
All right, motion to reject the 177 ballots that were missing a secrecy envelope.
Second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Before we move on, I did want to mention, as the board's aware, there was a new process for this election to help alert voters of the need for the secrecy envelope, wherein the secrecy envelope was enclosed in a yellow envelope, and wanted to make the board aware that we've seen a dramatic drop in the number of ballots that need to be rejected for lack of secrecy envelope, less than half the number of ballots as a year ago.
Great. Well, thanks for that innovation.
The next category is identifying marks. This is marks, like some folks will initial the secrecy envelope or put other marks on there other than straight marks. The election code and PA Democratic Party versus Bookvar make it clear that secrecy envelopes bearing identifying marks must be rejected. We had 14 of these ballots, and our recommendation is to reject those 14 ballots.
All right, motion to reject the 14 ballots which had identifying marks on the secrecy envelopes.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Our next category is Dropbox related situations. All of Bucks County's Dropboxes were manned or monitored by staff. As in prior election cycles, a small number of ballots were found at or near the Dropbox locations. These ballots cannot be counted because they were not properly received by the Board of Election. The chain of custody was broken, for lack of a better term. The most frequent example of this is a ballot being placed in a book drop box, since many of our drop boxes are located at libraries. We had 7 ballots in this situation. We had a situation in Northampton where a man dropped off his spouse's ballot. When he dropped his ballot, he admitted it right away, and our recommendation is to not count his ballot. The spouse's ballot was counted. The other way around, I'm sorry. We counted his ballot, but not his spouse's ballot. Ben Salem Township book drop. We had a ballot dropped in the library book box. Quakertown office, Government Service Center there, we had 2 ballots dropped off prior to the opening hours, and they were slid under the door. Warminster, we had a ballot put under the library door. And also in Warminster Township, we had 2 ballots put in a library book drop. Our recommendation on these 7 ballots is to reject them.
All right, motion to reject the 7 ballots with Dropbox incidents.
I do have a quick question.
I think we should, you have to second it, and then we can,
I'll second
then we
it.
can discuss it.
I'll
Yeah.
second that motion.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
any discussion?
My question is, when people do this and they drop it off, for example, under the library door in the book drop, are the ballots then just segregated, or is there a way to contact those people to say you put it in the wrong box?
Yeah,
So
it's a
that they
good
can
question.
actually vote?
So the Northampton Dropbox, when this happened, for example, they were actually both put in the bag in the Dropbox. What we do in those situations is we will close that, we'll seal up that bag that's existing, we'll put a new bag in there, and that bag is brought to Board of Elections and it's set aside to be counted separately.
I think the question is, in effect, whether there's an opportunity to cure.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
whether the voter is contacted to say, you need to come up, pick it up, and drop it back off again.
Yes, that's exactly right. We do have them, if we find out about them soon enough, we contact them and cure them. Many of these were at day of election, right, Kelly, or right around the day of election, so limited time to cure. But if we find out about them early on in the election cycle, we do notify them and let them correct their error.
And did anyone return library books to the ballot box? All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to reject the identified ballots by categories, say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
And you asked about curing. We had about 80 ballots this time that were cured. Ballots that were in these categories we received early. Maybe they weren't signed or not dated. And those folks were contacted. They were able to come down to Board of Elections and correct the deficiency and were able to vote. So that was, I don't remember how many we had in May, but it certainly wasn't 80. It was a much larger number. All right, miscellaneous categories. The first one is ballot signed by someone other than voter. Right, so we do not, and this is a question from earlier, we do not conduct signature analysis when ballots are received. However, if a ballot is received and the signature is clearly not that of the voter, then the ballot is pulled and placed into this category. More often, two members of the same household inadvertently sign each other's ballots. In this category, we had 35 ballots, and our recommendation is to reject those ballots.
Motion to reject the 35 ballots signed by someone other than the voter.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, the next item is a typo. We already covered the improperly received. Those were the ones at the ballot drop boxes. So we'll move on to the next category. Outer envelopes and secrecy envelopes, both torn open upon receipt at Board of Election. So this was a ballot, when the Board of Election received it, it was torn completely open where you could actually see the vote inside the ballot. Again, there's a chain of custody issue concern there. So our recommendation would be to reject this one ballot.
Motion to reject the one ballot torn so the vote was visible.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? All the,
I do have a discussion. On that, in that circumstance, was the voter also made aware of the situation so they could attempt to cure the problem?
They were, so that was an election day ballot. So they would be put on the list that was provided to both parties. So the parties could have contacted that individual that day, but I do not believe they did in this case. I do not believe that person came in and voted again. But the parties would have had the opportunity to contact that voter.
So this was actually torn before it got to the room for the count?
Yes.
That is what it was.
It says it was torn open upon receipt at the Board of Election.
At the Board of Election,
Board of
yeah.
Election.
Before it goes to the room where they count, yeah.
it was, when it was received, it was already torn.
Yes, that's correct.
And Judge Lillard, to your point, in the weeks and days leading up to the election, election staff go to great pains to reach out to each and every voter where there's an apparent deficiency or something that may interfere with their vote being able to be counted. On election day itself, election staff resources are, as you might imagine, devoted to processing the votes that have come in, and so it's much less common on election day that election staff are able to reach out to voters, but the parties have been helpful in that regard in this election and in prior years.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All those in favor of rejecting the torn secrecy envelope, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Next category is a portion of the outer envelope was torn, so you could not determine whether it was signed or dated. So I know you have an example of an outer envelope there in front of you. This was a unique one. Somehow just the writing on this side of the envelope was torn, so you couldn't tell whether the ballot or the outer envelope was signed or dated. It was secure, it was met all the other requirements, but we couldn't tell whether it was signed or dated. Because of that, we don't know that it was signed, so our recommendation is to reject that ballot.
Motion to reject the one ballot that was torn, resulting in a missing date and signature block.
Second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Didn't know how that one worked.
Yeah.
And the last item I had before I turn it over to our talented Board of Election staff is suggest a motion to adjudicate provisional and military overseas ballots falling into these approved segregated ballot categories similarly. So we haven't opened military and overseas yet. There may be some provisional ballots that would fall into these similar categories. Once we get into them, they might have identifying marks, for example. We don't know that yet. And if that's the case, then I would ask you to consider a motion to adjudicate those the same way, and that really saves you from having to come back and have another meeting. That's the whole point behind it.
So he throws that one in at the end that we wouldn't have to come back.
Yeah.
Motion to adjudicate provisional and military overseas ballots falling into the approved segregated ballot categories similarly.
I second that motion.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll move to a discussion of the status of the provisional ballots that were cast on November 7th. Kelly?
Okay. Oh, I have one. So we had 883 provisional ballots cast at the polls on November 7th. We'll start with the first category where voters were issued an absentee ballot, and it was not returned. So our recommendation is to count those ballots. There were 50 of them.
All right. Motion to accept the 50 ballots of folks who voted in person but did not return their absentee ballot.
Yes.
Is there a second?
And you said to accept it, right?
The recommendation is to accept.
All right, I second that motion.
All right, any discussion? And to be clear, it wasn't simply that they didn't proffer their mail-in ballot at the polls. It's that mail-in ballot was never received, correct?
I understand this is different. This isn't a mail-in ballot. This is an absentee ballot, right?
Right, so they both fall under the same rules. If they were issued an absentee ballot and they did not choose to return it to our office, or maybe they applied too late and they weren't able to return it to our office, they could go to their polling place and do a provisional.
And the absentee ballot was never received, so there's no concern about a double vote, correct?
Correct.
All right. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the next category is very similar. It's regarding the mail-in ballot that was issued but not received back by our office. Our recommendation is to count those ballots. There's 529 of them.
Motion to accept the 529 ballots of voters who voted in person and did not return their mail-in ballot.
I second that motion.
Any discussion?
Well, and again, this has been confirmed. There's no concern of double votes. They came in and voted one time, and we know we didn't receive their mail-in ballot, so they voted once.
Yes, Judge, it's all done in the research. We'll check their vote to see if they voted. If we did receive a mail-in ballot back or an absentee ballot back on, say, Election Day, before they knew that we received it, we'll check it. If there is no vote recorded, then we recommend to count the provisional.
All right.
And you'll see that category coming up here in a few minutes.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so the next category, there's 8 ballots that fall into the voters' eligibility was challenged. These voters should have just completed an affirmation, so our recommendation is to count these ballots.
Motion to accept the 8 ballots that were challenged at the polls.
I second that motion.
Any discussion?
Yeah, how does this challenge occur? Can you give us an example of what would happen?
Okay, so they didn't actually fill out challenge paperwork. It's just one of the reasonings on the provisional ballot envelope. So say somebody comes in and they're challenging, do you still live at your address? They could have just filled out the affirmation confirming whether or not they have moved or if they're still currently living at their address. They didn't offer them the affirmation. They gave them the provisional ballot instead.
And even in a situation like this, we check and make sure they vote once, right?
Yes.
And so, but the person doing the challenge didn't do a proper challenge, but the judge of elections required a provisional ballot, even though no proper challenge was filled out?
So one of the ways that the voter can be challenged is the poll worker challenging their eligibility, and it is a reason on the provisional ballot, so that's the reason that they checked off. If a watcher was challenging the voter's eligibility, then they would fill out the challenge affidavit.
And were these 8 at the same precinct, or were they scattered around the county?
They were scattered.
All right. All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Right, the next category, there are 41 ballots where the reason on the provisional ballot was name not on list, which means that they either didn't appear in the poll book or they couldn't find them in the poll book. All of these voters were actively registered, and we are recommending for their ballots to be counted.
A motion to accept the 41 ballots of persons whose names were not found in the poll book for various reasons.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
So these are folks that went, and when you say they're registered voters, they voted in the correct precinct?
There are 6 voters who appeared in the incorrect location, but their ballot is the same ballot, so we would recommend a full count.
It's the same ballot for, so they, in other words, I know there's some other categories here where they are people who went to the wrong precinct,
Yes,
but that can be a problem if they don't live in the precinct and there's a local election there.
correct.
These are folks, none of them have that discrepancy, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so this is the scenario that you just asked about. We are recommending for these 49 ballots to be partially counted. The voters are actively registered, however, they did not appear in their correct polling place because we have some statewide offices and countywide offices. There are some offices that would be the same on their own ballot, so we would recommend a partial count for those eligible offices.
So I would make a motion to reject these 49 ballots. And that's going to die for, right?
Motion dies for lack of a second.
I make a motion to partially count the ballots that were cast by voters who are registered in Bucks County but went to the wrong polling place. So,
That's it.
discussion.
And I'll second it. All right,
And then
any
just-
discussion?
Yeah, to be clear, then, the partial count will only be for the county and statewide votes, correct?
Correct, unless they share the same school board or auditor or another office.
And this has been the practice for how provisional ballots have been handled since provisional ballots started after HAVA in 2004 or thereabouts. Is that, I think I might have the longest experience among the staff with election process in Bucks County, but Dan, can you?
Yeah, it's certainly been the practice the last 2 years, and I wouldn't doubt your recollection.
Yeah, it's been the practice since I first started getting involved in county elections in the early 2000s. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
No?
The motion carries 2-1.
Okay, so we'll move on to the rejected category. Our recommendation is to reject the 28 ballots in this category because their mail-in ballot was received in our office, so that vote takes precedence over their provisional ballot.
Motion to reject the 28 provisional ballots of people who voted by mail-in or absentee.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
We have one ballot that did not have a judge of elections signature, so our recommendation would be to reject that.
Before the board considers this category, historically, the Board of Election has voted, and I believe you all voted in May similarly, to count these ballots in this category and a similar category where the judge of election signs but not the minority inspector. And the thought process, I believe, behind that is that that's not at the fault of the voter. That's a poll worker that failed to complete the task. The guidance from the Department of State does say that it should be signed by both the minority inspector and judge of elections. However, we have voted in the past to approve these since it is not the fault of the voter that the ballot wouldn't be counted.
And so we've got a couple different categories that we're going to be addressing the same basic issue, just with whether it was the judge of elections who didn't sign or the inspector who didn't sign.
Yes, that's accurate. And the one category where neither signed, we do agree that those should be rejected because there is no official that signed that. However, if one of them signs, it's been the board's decision in the past to count those ballots.
And then as we go on, we'll see we've got a few that are that there's some explanation for why one or the other didn't sign. So we'll address them one by one.
On this one, I would move to accept the ballot that was signed by the minority inspector, but not the judge of elections, the one ballot.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? I agree. I don't think, I think when it's an error of the election official, we should protect the franchise and make sure that the voter isn't disenfranchised because of the election official's error. All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, the next one is a similar category. There are 9 ballots that were not signed by the judge of elections or the minority inspector. So our recommendation, as it is now, is to reject those.
And a motion to reject the 9 ballots that are not signed by either the judge of elections or the minority inspector.
I'm sorry, it was to accept.
To reject.
Reject.
Yes. They're not signed by either one, so.
Can we have discussion?
Did
You can second it, and then we can have discussion. Someone can second it.
Makes it
I'll second it
you vote it down.
and for discussion purposes. My concern about this category, where it's not signed by either, is it raises a concern about the chain of custody and about whether the proper process for having it filled out was followed when it doesn't bear either signature. Right. So that's my concern about a count of these.
I think another, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I would say it questions the integrity of that ballot. We don't know where it came from or.
Well, and, I'm sorry, are you done?
Yeah.
My concern is, are these all coming from the same polling place? Are these a variety of different places? Is this, people aren't being trained properly? What's the concern? Is it the sideways one?
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet. Are they grouped on the spreadsheet or are they spread out?
No, they are grouped. This should be towards the end.
And this is the horizontal spreadsheet, not the vertical one?
Yes.
That's right.
This is in the 3-point font? Making sure. Like.
Okay, so they are in different precincts. It's not all the same judge or the same minority inspector. We did offer additional trainings to the districts that needed it last election, and we also created a provisional ballot video that we shared at each training. And we also made a point to specifically mention at each training that all of the signatures must be present.
All right. Unfortunately, these pages aren't paginated. Give us just a minute.
I think, is this the one with the 28-1?
Yeah.
On this, are we looking at the right page where the blocks are broken into 28, 1, 9, and 4?
Yes,
Does that make sense? Yeah.
yes. We're looking in the category where there's 9 voters
Right,
affected.
right. So it shows from Warrington, New Britain, Levittown, Percy, Levittown, Doylestown, spread all over, right?
Yes.
All right, any further discussion? And the motion that was made was to reject these.
These 9.
These 9. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the next category, there are 4 ballots where the judge of elections did not sign. Our recommendation is to reject them. However, the only reason they're in a separate category is if the board was to vote to accept them, they would be a partial count because they did not go to the correct district.
But,
Motion to reject the 4 ballots that were signed by the minority inspector, but not the judge of elections because they were voted in the wrong district.
Motion dies for lack of a second.
I make a motion to partially count the ballots that were signed by the minority inspector, but not the judge of elections because they voted in the wrong district.
Sorry, Your Honors, could we offer a bit of clarification on this category?
Okay, so the description on the memo says ballot signed by the minority inspector, but not the judge of elections because they're in the incorrect district. I'm sorry, that is correct. It's just
Yeah.
the wording is different. I just wanted to make sure we were voting on the correct.
Yeah, we have it twice, once signed by the minority, not the judge, once signed by the judge and not the minority.
Yes, I apologize for that.
All right, I'll second the motion. I think this is in effect, putting together the two issues that we've already addressed further. Any further discussion on it?
This is the partially count.
This is the partial count question, right?
But it was confirmed that they are registered in Bucks County, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
No.
Motion carries 2-1.
All right, the next category is signed by the judge, but not the minority inspector. There are 26 ballots in this category. A few of them had last-minute minority inspector appointments, which could have had an effect on the lack of signature.
Motion to accept the 26 ballots signed by the judge of elections, but not the minority inspector.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the next category is the minority inspector did not sign. Again, this is similar to the judge of elections not signing. If this was accepted, it would be a partial count because the voter voted in the incorrect district.
I'll make a motion to reject the 3 ballots that were signed by the judge of elections, but not the minority inspector because they voted in the wrong district.
You want to just?
I just like
motion to approve.
Go through the whole process.
All right. All right. Motion dies for lack of a second. Judge Lillard?
I make a motion to partially count the ballots that were signed by the judge of elections, but not the minority inspector because the voter voted in the wrong district.
All right, I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
No.
Motion carries 2-1.
The next 17 ballots we are recommending to reject because they lacked a secrecy envelope. So similar to the mail-in and absentee ballots, they do require a secrecy envelope to be counted.
Motion to reject the 17 ballots that were missing the secrecy envelope.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
The next 25 ballots we are recommending to reject because they are not registered in Bucks County.
Motion to reject the 25 ballots from voters not registered in Bucks County.
I second that motion.
The memo says not registered voters as opposed to not registered in Bucks County.
That is correct. The next category goes into voters registered in a different county.
Okay. So
These
these
voters
weren't
are-
registered voters at all, these 25?
Correct.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
The next 23 ballots are from voters registered in different counties across Pennsylvania, but not Bucks County. Our recommendation would be to reject them.
Motion to reject the 23 ballots from voters who are registered not in Bucks County, but in another county in Pennsylvania.
I second that motion.
Is there a mechanism for determining whether they also voted in the other county, or is that not possible because of the mechanics going on at the same time in both counties?
So our system does cross over the entire state. However, it would depend on when they update their voting records for each voter.
All right. All those in favor with rejecting these 23 ballots, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, so the spreadsheet has them broken down. However, the memo has them lumped together. These are all voters that did not sign either Section 2 or Section 4 on the provisional declaration envelope. Our recommendation would be to reject these 51 ballots.
Motion to reject the 51 ballots for voters who did not sign the provisional ballot twice.
I second that motion for discussion.
All right.
So I have a question. So then when the provisional ballot is filled out at the polling place, I see you need to sign it in number 2 and 4. So does the judge of elections give directions on how to do that? Who does that?
The judge of elections would direct the voter to sign. The voter is supposed to sign Section 2 prior to getting the ballot, then complete the ballot, put it into the envelopes, and then sign Section 4, followed by the judge of elections and minority inspector.
Are the judge of elections and or the minority inspector supposed to look at this to make sure it's been signed, or they just take it and throw it in the box?
They should look at it prior to because they're signing after the voter. So
Right.
The intent is to look over the entire envelope and then sign once it's complete.
Okay. I do have concerns that some of these judges of election and the minority inspectors aren't doing what they should be doing. And now some of these voters are going to not have their ballots counted as a result of the employees not doing what they need to do. So I'm concerned about that.
That's a concern, I agree, but I think the other thing is that the law does require these signatures to be on there, and
Right.
just like we do with the mail-in ballots, if the signatures aren't there, I don't think we can count them. So.
But I think.
But I agree with you, I think
Yeah.
that that's a concern.
Yeah, the difference with the mail-in ballots is you don't have an official standing there who's signing after you're supposed to sign it. So that's, I think, the distinction, but
No, I agree, I think it's a concern, I just think,
Yeah, the only caveat I'd give you is if a voter was given a ballot and signed it when they were given the ballot, and then we don't have that second signature from them, we don't know who actually completed that ballot. That's where, the chain of custody of the handing it in, and it could be, right, that the poll worker failed and like is the case most of the time, but we don't know that that voter actually turned in that ballot without that signature on the back end.
because they do go to one of the screened seats at the table, fill in the ballot, put it in the envelopes, they're supposed to sign it, then take it back to the judge of elections, then they sit at a different table and they sign them. And so it could be, just to give an example, you could take your mother in to vote, and then you take her ballot, and that's not proper for you to take it from her to the judge of elections. She's supposed to do that.
It's not the signing of the ballot, which is how it's written, though, right? It's the signing of the outer envelope for the ballot,
Yes,
correct?
that's right, yep.
Because that's how you preserve the secrecy, so that no one is seeing the vote. And so there's two different, blocks here on the provisional ballot envelope. One is a voter affidavit saying that they're swearing or affirming that the name and date of birth are right, but at that one, there's not a dating of it, and it's only on the other signature where you are affirming that you're properly registered voter in the district and eligible to vote, that there's a date.
were they signed by the judge of elections? So on the reason for ballot where it says for election officials only, did they sign it? Even though there weren't two signatures?
Some were, there's 3 different categories here. If you look at your database, it's a category of 31, and I know it's hard to see, 31 ballots, the next one is 2, and the last one is 18.
Yes.
Some of these,
Yeah, I don't see anything about the judge of elections.
no, I'm sorry, there's some where the minority inspector didn't sign.
Where is that
It's
reflected?
the
three
last
above
3 in
18?
the category had the no minority inspector signature.
So
All of the rest
about
of them
midway
did
down
have
the
the
page.
signatures.
So of these 20, or these 51, they were all signed by the judge of elections and the minority inspector?
No. No, I thought we were saying that some of these didn't have, some of these had
Yeah, voter
multiple
didn't sign
errors,
2
in
and
effect.
4. Some
Yes.
was an incorrect district, okay.
And some had no, 3 of them had, the voter didn't sign in section 4, and there was no minority inspector. Now, 2 out of 3 of those were in the same precinct.
right, so the 31 people, there was about, I'm gonna just guess, it's like 27 didn't sign section 2. 4 of them didn't sign section 2 and put the incorrect district.
But of these 31, it looks like there was not an issue, that the judge of elections and the minority inspector both signed them.
It seems that way.
Correct, correct.
So
But right now, we're looking at, the motion, I think, is as to all 49,
category.
rather than having it segregated.
51.
I'm sorry,
You said 49.
I did, because I was looking at this.
Yeah, there's a, because
Yep.
49
Yep.
signed once instead of
Yep.
twice, and
Yep.
2 didn't sign
I
up.
misspoke, I apologize.
And really, no matter what incredible trainings our election staff continue to put on and to innovate in terms of video offerings and demonstrations and so on, poll worker trainings aren't mandatory. And
They're
so
not mandatory?
They're not.
Okay.
And in effect, people are, those folks, they do get a check for the day, but it's an incredibly long day for people who are effectively volunteers.
Yes.
Are you going to do additional trainings for these locations? Because I noticed that some of them are, looks like the same location.
We can pull the districts that were having issues like we did after the last election and bring them in for additional training again.
I think that would be immensely helpful so that additional votes aren't getting rejected in the future.
Yes, we can do that.
All right, any further discussion? So the motion was to reject all 51 in this category. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the next category, the voters were required to show ID, whether it was their first time voting or first time voting in that precinct. They failed to show ID, they were issued a provisional ballot. They do have 6 days to come to our office to show us ID before this meeting to allow us to count their ballot, however, they did not. So our recommendation is to reject these 8 ballots.
Motion to reject the 8 ballots of voters who did not show ID at the polls and did not provide a ballot at the Board of Elections within the prescribed time.
I second that motion.
Discussion? There's a small category of folks who are required to show IDs, and I take it the board has confirmed that the request for an ID by the judge of elections was proper in these among these ballots.
Yes, that takes place during the research process.
All right.
Just on the side, it would be nice if everybody showed their ID, but all right, that's a different question.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, the last category, there were 11 ballots that were not contained in the affirmation envelope. They were just ballots contained in the secrecy envelope, put into the large envelope that were returned to us. So we don't know who these voters are. They did not have any signatures from either poll workers or the voter themselves. So our recommendation is to reject these ballots.
Motion to reject the 11 ballots that were placed into the outer provisional envelopes with no information on them, including no signatures.
I second that motion.
I certainly agree. Is there a way of determining where they were coming from? Same kind of question about whether you can identify a precinct where perhaps additional, I don't know whether it's an error of a judge of elections or something else, but.
So they were all from the same precinct. This particular judge of elections did come to training. I spoke with her at training. So we will offer her additional training if she chooses to fill in again. This is her second election working. So still kind of getting the hang of things, but we will offer her additional training if she chooses to come back again.
But this was an error by the voter in how they organized and put the envelopes together, correct?
It appears that the 11 voters were not offered the declaration envelope.
Okay. But that makes it also, there's no way to assure that they are voters in that district.
Correct.
Okay.
Did we have a motion?
Yeah. There's a motion
Sorry.
to reject the 11.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. All right, I think that concludes the discussion on the provisional ballots. Any other old business? Any new business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second that motion.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And I want to, again, thank the staff for all your hard work. I know this is a very, very challenging time, both in terms of time and public demands, and we really appreciate your service to the county.
Yes. All right, thank you.